can't make everybody happy all the time. So there's always something going on that you have to take a look at and go, okay, Lord, what now? Where do I fit here, and what can I do? Beyond that, I did help to write the Grace Link. I just was a tiny little cog in a really, really big wheel. But that was an awesome experience too, and just starting to look at everything that we do with children from the concept of grace. It was probably one of the first times that I've ever really just gotten to focus on where my heart lies, which I really, really believe, honestly, that the only thing that we really have to teach, show, share, experience is the grace of God. Because that's the starting place, and once we experience that for ourselves and begin to find ways to give it away, everything else just falls into place. So it's not even that you have to work at or learn or try. Once you have that central theme, once you've really experienced it and feel that kind of grace, and then you begin to give it away, it's amazing how you just really don't have to work very hard at anything else, even though everything else is hard work. Does that make sense? So it's a tough job loving people. It's a tough job loving kids. Sometimes I really believe it's harder loving parents than children. The kids are like the easy part, but it's the parents sometimes. But because of who we are and what we do, we only get to have these kids in our sphere of influence for maybe, if we're lucky, an hour a week, or maybe if some of you guys have kids 2 hours a week, or maybe you have after-school programs or something else, you might get them a little longer, but really they're in their world 90% of their lives or 95% of their lives. So finding a way to equip families or to love on families in a way that will model how they love their children or show grace to their children is really, I think, such a huge part of what we do, no matter whether you're a Sabbath school teacher or a VBS leader or children's ministry pastor or whatever it is that you folks do out there. So how many of you are primarily Sabbath school teachers? And I say primarily, I just mean I'm kind of trying to get a feel from where you come from. And then VBS folks, any VBS folks here? How about children's pastors or Sabbath school coordinators, more like a leadership kind of thing? Anybody here paid to do what you do other than God's love? Or to actually get money? Okay, so some of you actually have jobs that you do, and others have this volunteer heart. So it's good to know where you come from. My early experience with kids started with my own 3. I've got 30. My son is 30, and I don't know how he's 30 because I'm only like 35, but we've worked it out to where he just turned 30. I have a 27-year-old, my middle daughter is 27, and my middle child, and then my youngest is 23, going on 14 some days, I think, but they grow up a lot slower these days. But I think because of that, even as we look at the trajectory of who kids are and where they come from and how they grow and how they mature, even that requires that we have to have this basic understanding of God's grace and then how we offer that to kids in the middle of their world and their challenges. So, why did you choose this seminar? Why'd you come here instead of somewhere else? Or what do you hope to? What are you hoping that you'll take away from this time together? You don't want anything. You're here because you didn't have to move very far, because the other seminar was here before you came. Yes, ma'am.
I'm the pastor of a church, and I'm really trying to equip my volunteers with this understanding.
Okay.
Grace flows through everything.
Wonderful.
And it's not just kind of implementing a pre-planned curriculum. It's actually letting yourself be the vessel of that grace. And so just wanting to hear more about that, what that looks like, what that feels like for my volunteer corps.
Beautiful.
It doesn't get paid.
So did you hear what she said? She really wants to just help infuse this sort of concept or help folks get a little bit better understanding of what it looks like to have grace run through everything with her team, right? What else?
In the general session before, they talked about being relationship-driven instead of program-driven. Grace can do that.
Yes, absolutely. Relationship-driven rather than program-driven. Anyone else? Love it. Without grace, you can do nothing. Okay. The Bible has a lot to say about grace, and one of the things that it talks about is just that grace is what saves us. So it's that saving thing, and some people, what is the little acronym? God's riches through Christ. Gee, let me see. I should have written it down. God's riches through Christ. Whatever. God's riches through Jesus. But anyway, it's this thing that God gives to us, but it came through that saving power of Jesus. So that first piece of it is, it's what saves us. We don't deserve it. Nothing we do Nothing we do can earn it, and yet it's ours free of charge. The other thing is that grace is a changing or a reorganizing of our whole lives, our whole perspective. One of my favorite concepts in my world is perspective is everything. So it doesn't even matter what's going on in your life. It matters how you perceive it, what's happening there. That's going to have everything to do with your response. Grace changes your perspective. All of a sudden, grace isn't just something that's out there or that it's unmerited or there's a definition for it. All of a sudden, it makes you lovable to the God of the universe when you know that you're not that lovable. This morning when I had my time with God, I was just like, I never understand why I'm here. I mean, I don't say that to be self-deprecating. I never understand. I just love God so much, and it astounds me that he loves me, because I know I could give you a laundry list that will curl your toes about who I really am or what I've done or what I think on a daily basis or how often I have to bring myself back to God. And yet he chooses to use us anyway. That core understanding, coming to experience that for yourself, changes everything about who you are and about what you have to give away. Have you experienced grace? Outside, I mean, not just the typical thing. I'm not just saying that God loves you, but what are some experiences that you've had where some tangible experiences of experiencing grace, that thing that you didn't deserve or didn't work for or didn't earn, but you got anyway? I'll give you my example, and then I think maybe it might work if you're in, I like to have you with folks you didn't come here with, but some of you didn't move around too much. So I think what will happen is maybe you three, maybe the two of you and you three back there in a minute when we do our pair share or our sharing time. Several years ago, it stands out still in my mind, I pulled up into a parking space where it said clearly don't park here, but I was only going to be a minute. Right? And so it was in a shopping mall. I was in front of the Apple store, and, that's a popular place anyway. And I pulled up there. I looked around. Of course, you want to scope out. There's no police, so I'm good. Just for a minute, I'm just going to go in and see if my Mac's done, if I can pick it back up or not. I was in there maybe 3 to 4 minutes, literally. I came back out, and there was a ticket on my car because I parked in the red zone. And the ticket, and it's in my other bag that didn't arrive with me because I was going to actually show it to you, but it said on there, grace, it started out by saying, grace reminder. Loved it. And then he wrote me a little note, or she, I think it was a he wrote me a little note that said, I know you're probably in a hurry, which is why you parked where you shouldn't have. Just so you know, this is a ticketable offense, but today I'm giving you a warning. Please be careful about where you park again. I was so overwhelmed. I sat there. I can still cry today when I think about it. Grace makes me cry a lot. But I sat there looking at this ticket going, no way. I mean, I deserved this ticket. It was at rush hour. Of course, it was busy. Every place was busy because it was the time to be wherever you wanted to be. And I parked in a no parking zone. I went over to the security office and said, is this policeman, around? He's out there. He's doing his thing or whatever. So he wasn't there. I just left him a note. Thank you so much. Every time I think and talk about God's grace to me, this ticket will be part of that experience for me. It was just such a tangible reminder that I knew I deserved it. When I parked there, I knew that there was a chance. I took the risk on purpose, and yet what I got in return was grace, and he didn't have to give it. I found out from the lady at the counter it would have been a $275 ticket because I actually parked in a red zone, do not park here, big old fat red thing zone. Free. What about you? Have you experienced that kind of grace in your life? I want you just to spend maybe a 3 minutes with each other just recounting something that you've experienced that really was a tangible piece of grace to you. You know you didn't deserve it, and maybe even you intentionally did something that you knew you shouldn't have, and you still got grace anyways. Go ahead and spend a few minutes just chatting. about 1 more minute, so make sure that folks in your group get a chance to share. If you're like me, you could talk about grace all day long, but I'll just give you a few minutes to finish up. Another minute to finish up. Okay. The reason I wanted to give you a little chance to share your own version of grace is because I truly believe that you cannot give or teach to anyone else what you haven't personally experienced. You can tell them about it, but that's not the same, is it? Jesus over and over and over said, not that he wanted us to know about grace. He wanted us to love each other like the Father loved us. He wanted us to see God in him. He wanted us to draw close to him, rely on him, remember that nothing is impossible without him and nothing is doable without him. Everything is too much for us. Even taking our next breath, we take that for granted, but you can't do it by yourself. It really takes this whole system to equip you to do that. One of my favorite grace stories in the Bible is the feeding of the 5,000. And I love that Jesus said, these people have to eat. I mean, there was that situation that was brought to him. The disciples are like, they're hungry, they didn't come equipped, they weren't prepared, whatever, what are we going to do? And one little lunch shows up. Jesus could have done that miracle, I think, in 1,000 different ways to provide. I don't know what it would have all looked like. Maybe manna would have fallen from heaven. Maybe fruit would have dropped off the trees. I don't know. There's in my brain, when I think about it, I had little kids work on that one time with me, and they came up with like 60 different things that he could have done, immediately to feed the folk. But what he chose to do was to take one offering from one little guy and bless it. But the most amazing thing about it is, instead of just, what's the word I want? Sorry, lose my words. I call it menopause moments. But instead of spreading it out, giving it to folks himself, or by having all the crowd come up through the buffet line or serve themselves, what did he do? He took it and handed it to his disciples, right? And they took it from his hand, and they somehow managed to serve, to become waiters and food servers to all of these people. And again, I'm not sure how it went. Maybe they in turn gave it to, 12 other people who gave it to 12. I don't know how it all looked in the end. But first, it came from Christ. And second, it went into his workers' hands. And third, it went to the flock. It went to the sheep. It went to the congregation. It went to the children, right? And I love it because the disciples had no power to multiply that on their own. None. In fact, they were stumped. And even when Jesus said, bring me the lunch, they're like, what? You're going to cut this into 5,000 pieces? They totally had no concept of how it was going to happen. I don't know about your experience in God's work, but most of the time I wake up to my day, whether it's to my job as an occupational therapist dealing with my patients, or whether it's to my job of serving 7,000 plus people in the Loma Linda University Church, I wake up and go, what? How is this going to work? How am I going to pull this off? How am I going to ever manage this? Maybe it's just one angry mom, in the office that says, I don't like your new child check system. This is dumb. I've been going to church here forever. I don't need to check my kid in and out of here. Maybe that's all your day holds, or maybe it's, the new volunteer check, not new, but the volunteer check system that says, what? You don't trust me to work with kids? I'm not filling out this paper. Who knows what it could be, or something like a little kid who's suffering abuse, or another little kid who's in your Sabbath school room that's just a pain in the tush, and no matter what you do, this kid is causing you grief. But whatever it is, it should, if it doesn't, it should appear completely overwhelming to you. You should not have a clue about what you're going to do with that until or unless you stop and go, wait, God's enough for this. He's got this. If he's got me, he's got this, right? Because you're a problem child too. You know it, don't you? You cause him grief, and you park in the wrong spots, and you don't move up from the back row to the front row, or whatever it is. You get fearful. You start to go in your head and go, oh, how am I going to work out this problem? I'm going to have 32 things that in case this happens, and I'll do this, I'll do. And God says, stop. You can't do it. That's what grace is about to me. You can't do this. Stop, because I got it. I got this covered, and I can do this for you. It's just a little lunch, but I got it. I already had this planned before you were even a twinkle in your mom's eye. I already knew this moment was coming. I had it covered. Here's the plan. The only hitch in God's plans, I believe, are when we get so busy trying to sort it all out that we forget to just stop and listen. I think it's so important for you to do that, because if you don't do it, then you will not be a good leader. You will not be a good lover of children. You'll not be a good lover of families, because on some level we start to be a little superior. We start to think, I got this, or, oh my word, I would never behave like this, or just check your kid in already. I mean, really, is it that big of a deal? We start to feel and see things like the disciples did. There's no way. There's no way. So if she changes churches, big deal. I had one of my friends tell me one time, you can't please everybody, Jackie. You've got like 7,000 people in this church. So if she leaves, there's literally, I think there's 16 different churches in the Loma Linda area within 5 miles. I mean, and they're everything from really conservative to really liberal to praise music to, no drums on the platform. I mean, wherever you want to go. And she's like, big deal. She's got a million other choices around here. Let her go. And that's true. I mean, I don't ever try to keep anybody that doesn't want to be there. But on the other hand, I want her to go knowing she was loved. I want her to go knowing that I may not change my rule, and I didn't. I mean, kids need to be checked in, especially when you're dealing with 700 to 1,000 of them every week. I got to know where they are and, what's happening, and if somebody gets sick or there's an earthquake, or I need to know how we can best meet the needs of our children. So that's not the point of changing, but all through that whole thing, giving her grace. I can't do that unless I know how wicked I am. Because you really can't understand grace unless you know how unworthy you really are, and not just in your words, but in your heart. One of the things that one of my mentors had me do a long time ago was make a list of all the reasons I don't deserve grace. Oh my word, it will go on and on and on. But it's a good perspective for you to understand that you don't deserve it on any level. I don't care if you don't sleep with somebody you're not married to, or if you never beat your kid, or if you didn't ever take money that wasn't yours. Doesn't matter, because you might not have done all that stuff, but you did all this other stuff, right? It would be good for you to make at least a little list, a short list. If you got little people and other people in your homes, you might want to burn that after you make your list. But I really made a long list of just my dishonest heart and my difficulty with my own personal integrity and the times that I'm so fearful. All those things I put down there. Some are really things I would never say in public, and other things I would tell you and still feel bad about or whatever. The times I didn't want to pay my tithe because I didn't have enough money and I need to do this first and God will have to make it up over here, or whatever. Make a little list, at least in your head, so that you understand how precious and priceless you are to God, because that stuff doesn't matter. He does not care about that stuff. He knew you from the moment he began forming you in your mother's womb. And he says that he loves you, and you cannot make him love you anymore, and you can't make him love you any less. And you may get that here, but you got to get it here before you give it away. So I think the disciples knew on the mountain that day, or in the field that day, that Jesus could probably figure it out. I mean, they had seen enough miracles that he could probably figure it out, but it probably looked more like, go on into the village, got yourself some lunch, we'll be back. Who knows? In my brain, that's what I would have probably thought. Maybe there's some berry fields around, go and pick some berries. I don't know. But the disciples never in a million years could have imagined just how he was going to sort it all out. And I think it's the same for us. We have to understand that God's got it. He's got you. It doesn't make any sense to you. Grace should not make any sense to you. The second that you understand grace, I didn't really like this title. I kind of fought against it. But it's kind of already in the program of things that you need to that you can get on the Children's Ministry certification track. And so because of that, I left it, because I don't think we can understand grace. I would have titled it something like personal experience of grace, or personally experiencing grace, or coming to a new perspective about grace, something like that, because I don't think we can understand it. Our whole way of doing business says, I come and I'll trade my time for you'll buy me a plane ticket. Or I'll give you this phone for $200. Or I'll work really hard. Our whole system is about exchange. I'll give something and I'll take something. You give something, you'll take something. Very, very few things in our lives are we just give it for fun and for free. Just doesn't happen like that. And even when we do, it's a tax write-off. Right? I can mark it down and I can, whatever it is, it's our whole system. And I think so Satan confuses us. The enemy confuses us and says, you got to give something to get something. And once we see that, then I'm automatically better than you because I'm doing this good thing, but you don't do this good thing. Or, the guy that's locked up for murder, who I'm way better than him because because I haven't ever murdered anybody. I mean, that's not on my list yet. So I've got to be, but not in God's eyes. I mean, do you really get that? Do you believe it? And can you translate it from here down to here? Because once you do, it changes you. It reorganizes who you are and how you think. And it also dictates to you immediately how you treat everybody in your world. Traffic is a personal example for me. I drive a lot. I drive about 185 to 200 miles a day because I do home health therapy. So I go around to see all these folks in their homes, and it usually takes me half an hour to get to my first client, and then I go around. People are crazy. They're not as crazy in Colorado as they are in California, but they're crazy. They cut you off. If you make a mistake or accidentally do something, you get, a flip off of a finger out the window, or even sometimes rolling down the window and they're screaming at you. It's hard to think about grace at that moment because I would never do that. If I'm going to, make an unpleasant gesture or think or say something, I say it to myself. No one ever knows but God, right? So that's better than that guy over there, right? Because I heard every word of it. But grace changes you because I say to myself, oh yeah, I deserve that because I did pull right in front of him or I stopped or whatever. God, help him not to lose his cookies over that because really I'm not worth upsetting your whole day over or whatever. All of a sudden I get it in a different way because I'm no better or worse. It's just me and him on a journey. He's maybe a little bit further behind me because he's still flipping people off out the window. Although I got to say I never ever have done that. But, he's doing that. That's where he's at on his journey. God, help him to understand how much you love him because then you can't really flip people off. You just don't even think about it because there's this love in your heart that God's given you and you pass it on. Before you leave today, I want you to write down a 10-word sentence of something that you took away from this time together. I would really encourage you to do it from 10 words or less, from every place you go, because every one of the breakouts, the general sessions, because you're going to get a lot of information this weekend, and you're going to go home with this lovely little book, and it will probably go on my shelf next to the 37 others that I've, collected in my 20, 30-year career here. And it's great information, and sometimes I pull it out, I'm going to this thing, I may want to share this. But it is just a lot of information. When you write it down, whatever you picked up today, and then tonight when you go back to your room, go over those 3 or 4 or 5, just those little 5 sentences that you heard and learned, and ask God to really put those in your heart. File them in there to where they change you, and you may not be able to spit it back out just perfectly quoted the way somebody did today, but it's in there, and it begins to change and soften and reorchestrate, organize your perspective. Perspective is everything. And how you understand how much God loves you is directly proportionate to your perspective or your understanding about how little you deserve to be loved. Because something happens when you know that you don't deserve it and you get it anyway. All of a sudden, you feel loved in a huge way. It's not the opposite. You don't feel unlovable. I mean, I felt bad the guy had to stop and write me a ticket. I felt so overwhelmed with gratitude that he gave me a grace ticket. All I wanted to do was go and see him and tell him, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. So it didn't result in me, my knowing that I was guilty did not result in me going, oh, shoot, I shouldn't have done this. No, it was exactly the opposite. When I knew I was guilty and then I experienced the grace, all of a sudden it gave me wings. I felt good for weeks after that. I still have it in my dash, and I often just run across it and just open it up and go, it's so great. And every time I talk about grace, I remind people, I tell people again, and it reminds me all over again how little I deserve or how nothing I deserve, and yet how awesome God's gifts are to me. God, I used to call it God sightings with kids. So I'm going to challenge you today, too, to look for God sightings or grace sightings. Keep your eyes open. They are everywhere. We just don't look for them very often. So it's a great sort of plan of action to start out. I don't do too many things always, but I always start out every single day telling God how I don't understand why he loves me. I am just so amazed that he does. Use me today. What would that look like? And during the day, all during the day, I get fearful, I get worried, I get sidetracked, I get mad, I get all those things. I don't want to put myself up as any example at all. The only good example I have for you today is I every single morning say, I don't know what the day holds, and I don't know how I'm going to get through it, but I know you're going to do it. I was married to an alcoholic, and then I got divorced, and then I raised my 3 kids on my own. And I mean, I've been there, done that with life. But the thing that's kept me constantly is to say, I don't know what's around the next corner, but it's going to be good. It might hurt in the meantime, but it's going to be good. And it always has been. Last night when I got into Portland, I was tired. I got 4 extra patients yesterday morning, and so I was going to just see 1 patient, and then I was going to do my packing, get on the plane, head off to Portland. But I got 4 new patients. So all of a sudden here I am seeing patients 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And then I already had 1, and I needed to leave for the airport by 3. And so I said, okay, how am I going to do all this stuff? So I get to the airport, and the person is not there to get me. And I'm like, really? Because I'm a presenter. Right? Because you can just get so superior about silly things like that because the universe circles around me, right? So where is she? How come she's not standing right here when I get here? And so almost as soon as it passed, I'm like, what? Who am I? Look at God calling me to this place, using me. I don't know what I'm going to say. I don't know how I'm going to do. But God's bringing me here. He's going to use me. So what is this delay about? I'm not even kidding you. Within a minute of saying, okay, well, do I want to go get some coffee? Do I want to go sit down and read? What do I want to do? I look up, and on the escalator, this gentleman has a cane, and I even thought to myself, what is he doing? Because I'm a therapist, right? People in canes do not go on escalators. I say it to my older people all the time. Are you kidding me? No. When you need 3 legs to do something, you should be on an elevator doing it. You should not be on. So as I'm looking, he literally falls. He falls on the escalator. And I don't know, maybe as far as here out to the hallway. And I'm like, okay, you can't leave your bags unattended in the airport. I mean, everything is going on in my brain. So I'm dragging my big bag over here and my purse and my little computer there. I'm dragging across the thing. I get over there. Somebody has had the presence of mind to stop it. And so I'm going, okay, well, let me see if I can help. He's bleeding profusely. I mean, I think he might have nicked an artery or something on his leg because it's just his foot is already blood-soaked, his sock. So I'm getting him down. All of a sudden, I'm like, okay, we have to put pressure on this. First thing that goes through my mind is, what if he has a bloodborne pathogen or a bloodborne disease or whatever? It's like, do I have any cuts? Whatever. But he's bleeding, so you have to put pressure on it. So I'm just like, okay, God, protect me. Stick my hands on there, and everybody's like, here, I'm going to get you some gloves. Yeah, no, that ship has sailed, because now the blood is dripping all down through. Anyway, very long story later, they get me some napkins from Starbucks. I hold it on there, keep the pressure. Somebody else is calling 911. It takes about 15 minutes before they actually get there, pull up in their little ambulances and come in. And in the meantime, someone's gotten me a T-shirt. I made a tourniquet. I'm chatting with the wife and family and whatever. It's what I do, right? Because it's my medical background. I was just right in the right place at the right time. All because somebody didn't know how important I was and didn't pick me. But that's a tiny little example, but it can happen all the time. I think God derails plans both to keep us focused on him, but also to remind us how big his grace is in our lives. Have you experienced that kind of grace? I mean, have you come to the place in your life where you know how little you deserve it? Or are you still thinking you're a pretty good candidate for grace? Because if you think you're a pretty good candidate, or at least in the top 10, you're not getting it. That's not when it changes you. Understanding grace as the little bit that we can is really understanding how we do not understand how God could love me anyway. But he does. You're priceless and precious and worth dying for. So the next question comes in. Once you sort of start to internalize that and get it, how do you give it away? What does that look like? What does it look like then to be a sort of a waiter, as it were, as they were during the feeding of the 5,000? What does it look like to hold it in your hand and offer it away? So I have this little video here that these gentlemen have been kind enough to figure out for me, even though my bag with my cords. It's a good thing my bag didn't arrive, because I don't know what I would have done with the bag of techie stuff and my clothes and my purse and computer and whatnot. I probably would have not been able to hold my hands on a bloody leg. I wish I'd gotten his number. I would love to know how he's doing. So every time I watch that commercial, I love it, and it gives me goosebumps, and I cry. And some of that's because I'm a mom of three babies who I picked up forever and always, and in fact, I'm still picking them up in some ways. They're not quite, Olympic ready. They're working on it. But I want you to think about how that speaks, what that says to you about grace, how that is an example of grace. Ideas or thoughts as you watched it. Or maybe not. Could you see grace in there? Yeah. Okay. That's good. I really had never thought of that. The falling down was not just for the little kids, that the grown-ups were falling down as well and needed to be assisted or helped or loved or whatever. Yeah, beautiful point. What else? Uh-huh. Okay. Beautiful. Okay, so her point was a little bit more about vision. Tell me if I get it right. But about the mom being able to see sort of how it was all going to end and moving that child along. And it's the same way Jesus, he sees the finished product. He sees who we are in him, or who we were designed to be, or who we are destined to be, who we're going to be, right? And so all along the way, that vision is in mind. What else? Beautiful. Yeah. Okay, beautiful. So we're imperfect at extending grace, and yet during this video, we didn't see her, saying to the kid, "Psh, I'll just leave you there. Forget it. That's the 5th time." No, it was just every single time, up, up, up. Come on, you can do it. You can do it. Great, beautiful. Much like Christ, yeah? Exactly. So he doesn't go, bah, again, are you kidding me? I think sometimes he must do that when I come to him like, I'm so afraid about the money. What am I going to do? And he's like, oh, really again? Did you ever go hungry? Did you ever miss a mortgage payment? Did you ever live under a bridge? Okay, so probably you're going to be okay. What else did you see there when you looked at that video? How did it speak grace to you? Or how did it personally impact you? Yeah.
It's good to be reminded that we just don't know what you don't know. There's muscle memory that had to be built up.
Okay.
There's nurturing and formation that had to happen. There's practice that had to happen.
Another
Just be gentle with ourselves.
Another point I really had not thought about in that video, but that we don't know what we don't know. So that there's, along the way, there are things that must happen in order to get us to where we're going. So there's a journey that we have to go on to get to where we're going. Things we have to learn, falls that we have to take in order to do it better the next time. There's a journey. Yeah, absolutely. Same with our walk with Christ, our walk on the planet, right? Be gentle with ourselves. I think grace is never more needed than from us to ourselves. It's an interesting quote in the Bible to love your neighbor as yourself. There's so few of us that actually love ourselves, right? Because you can think of a million reasons not to love yourself, right? Or that you're not very lovable, or maybe your body doesn't look the way you want it to, or your husband left you, or your kids aren't in the church anymore, or, I mean, there's a million reasons that you could come up with that you're not lovable. Or you lost your temper when you didn't mean to, or you thought a thing that you didn't want to think, or, whatever. But we are precious and priceless to Christ. That is the message of grace. How do you show that to yourself? How do you sort of wiggle around in that and snuggle up to it, or bathe in it every day? And what difference would it make if you did that? How would that look to the grace that you pass on if you really sort of soaked it up every day? Anything else that you saw when you watched that? I love that video because it reminds me that there's a process, that there is a way that we experience that grace, but how do we give it back? So as you look at that picture, what kind of role, as the mom, or as the grace giver, it was the mom in that picture, but as the hands of Jesus, as somebody famous once said, I love Jesus, but I need somebody with skin on. So, some sort of hugs or whatever. How are you those tangible hands and feet and hugs? What ways can you lift people up, comfort them when they're down? Remember that it is a process, especially with children. Have mercy. You got to know that that's going to be at least, I used to say an 18-year journey. Now I really think it's more like a 25 to 30-year journey for most kids to really even start to sort of find their way. And that's something we didn't all sign up for as parents. I really thought my kids would be educated, really employed with a good career, and maybe even married with a kid or two of their own by 30. Are you kidding me? My kid is barely trying to figure out how to get out of my basement. So, it's a big difference, right? So what is that going to look like for you, having this stuff in mind and then passing it on to the kids in your world? What will that look like for you? So go ahead. Okay. Okay. Mm. Yes. 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 Mm-hmm. I love it. Or talk to me when I sit down on the plane because I really want to sleep. Exactly. Beautiful. So remembering that we have divine appointments, that we remember that we do stupid things too. I love that comment because that's really the perspective again. When you can internalize that grace, knowing that you do stupid things, it changes the way you treat other people. Because I'll guarantee you, when your kids are being a little crazy, or when you've got a tough person in Sabbath school, or a tough mom or dad, or when you had every intention of getting there on time, but you arrive right when when the kids are coming or whatever, you cannot get graced up at that point. You have to already sort of be bathed in an understanding. I do stupid stuff too, or I'm late too, or things don't always work out the way I want them to. And you can then extend that grace almost automatically without even thinking about what's going to happen next. Yeah? So I love that. So we're looking at sort of being aware of who we are and what we've received, and then who the kids are in our world and what they've received. Non-judgmental. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so the non-judgmental thing, again, I think what you're saying too is still, it's a matter of perspective, understanding that this is what is often given to me. And also, how many of you ever improved by somebody being condescending or yelling or shaming or blaming? How many, I mean, like if that cop had written me a ticket and then had proceeded to tell me what a jerk I am for parking in a place I didn't belong, and I know you're probably late. Well, join the world, lady. Everybody's late. Find your own parking place. Walk a little bit. You're probably too fat anyway. Probably could have used the exercise. I mean, there's a million things that could have happened. All that would have gone, I would have just gone, really, idiot cop, write me a ticket. You don't get to judge me. Just find me. Those were all things that would have gone on in my head, and I certainly wouldn't have gone over to the security office to try to figure out who he was and to thank him for it, right? So condemnation or criticism or judgment, shaming, mostly probably all of you grew up with that, because as a church, we're so much better at that than grace. I mean, we say a lot of things about grace, but then we look at you and go, oh man, I wish you were a little more like her, because she doesn't have jewelry on, or she's only been married once, or whatever it is. We don't maybe say it, but we say it. And somehow that does not bring us closer to Christ, right? That does not make me going to have wings and want to fly. All of a sudden, I just kind of want to hide and not, let anybody know that this is my life, or this is what I'm doing. Or maybe I stop coming to church. Or for sure, maybe I stop coming to Sabbath school, right? So in the way kids dress, in the way they look, in the way they act, in the way they talk, in the way they think, in the way they act out their pain, there are so many things that you're faced with in this world today that we weren't faced with 35, 40 years ago when I first started teaching. We have a different setup today, and so our kids need grace, but more than that, you need grace. You need to understand how much you're loved so that you can then take that from Christ's hand and pass it on. So the how went, go ahead. You know what, I'm going to give you this. And I know he can't film you, but I'm thinking I'm missing a little bit of what you're saying, and I would really like to pass it. I would like the people on the tape to hear it, which is why I wanted all of you problem children on the front row. No, it's not you, it's on the tape. It won't go on the tape or on the...
Good.
Speak up.
I was just thinking as I'm listening to you and putting all my thoughts together, and yes, I've been working with children for years, and I think that it's so important what you brought out about starting out the day and asking God, I don't know what's going to happen today. Help me, because this summer, for some reason, it's been a really wild summer for me. And some of the things that have happened have really shaken me, because I just had to go back to Chattanooga for a funeral, and I was back there when all those ones got shot and stuff. But I had this person walk up to me that I didn't even know was there, so to speak, and said, I just want you to know that when I was a teenager and I lived back in Oregon and I was in Pathfinders, you were the one that loved me. And when I got at your house, I never saw you, never got upset with me and all this. And I was so shocked, because I thought, I didn't know I did any of that. I had no idea. And unless we can ask God to help us every day. I mean, there's the days when we don't feel like being nice. But, you know, we are often, I guess, the only Jesus that some people ever see. And it amazes me when kids come back years later and bring up something that I didn't even think was important. You know?
Those are really good things to remember, because often we don't get to know that. You know, we don't get to know what a difference we made. I love Ray Boltz's song, Thank You, you know, about when we get there, we'll get to see or hear or be put in touch with folks that we really did do it right. One of my favorite songs says, so I have joy and I have regrets. Some days I did it, some days I got it right, and some days I didn't. You know, but those days that we got it right, we're going to get to know about and see and hear about. You get to do it right every day if you can just remember how much you're loved. I tell you, it changes everything. I grew up in a very unpleasant home, very abused, physically, sexually, emotionally, a lot of stuff. And I grew up believing I was not very lovable, and I worked hard to do it all right so that God would love me. I was a straight-A student, and I did everything. And then I found myself married to an alcoholic. I found myself with a couple of alcoholic kids, blah, 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 and so on and so on. And that was my best effort. And I'm really pretty good when I set my mind to it. I can do almost anything. My best efforts got me there. And it's one of my favorite phrases to this day. I know what my best efforts will get me. I'm very well aware, because I worked hard to get my mom to love me, and I worked hard to get God to love me. I worked hard to get my alcoholic to love me, and blah, blah, blah. Never even worked. It was only when I gave up and went, I guess what, I'm loved, not because of who I am or what I do, only because of who God is. It took me at a suicidal moment, really, in my life to get there. I don't think you need to get to a suicidal moment. I think God says, just embrace it. Just snuggle up in it. Wrap yourselves up in it so that people will just sort of see you and smell you coming. The last little illustration I want to give you is last night after I, had my blood-soaked hands. I even had it on my Fitbit. I was getting blood off my Fitbit. And I was like, oh, yeah, I have my oils, because I'm a big essential oil junkie, so I use my oils. It's like, oh, yeah, I have On Guard in my purse, and that'll kill, even MRSA. That'll kill MRSA. So I'll go wash my hands, and I'll just sort of drown myself in On Guard. It's got cassia, cinnamon, clove. It's some really strong fragrances are in there. Didn't even think about it. I just was like, oh, man, I'm glad I have this, just in case, right? And after that, I went over to Starbucks to get a little sandwich before I left. And when I went over there and paid her, she's like, ooh, what is that wonderful fragrance? And I'm like, wait, I'm not wearing any perfume. I really didn't even think about it, because I was thinking, disinfectant. That's what I'm trying to do with my hands. And I was like, oh, it's my doTERRA. Oh, and so and she's like, oh, it's lovely, let me smell. She smelled me coming. If I had wanted to give her a little spiel about oils or whatever, that would have been the best way to do it. I wasn't even thinking about that. I was just thinking, get myself clean. But she smelled me coming. And as I left, another lady said, what perfume are you wearing? I was like, it's my oils. I want people to smell me coming with my grace. I want people, before I open my mouth about loving the Lord, or about being a children's pastor, or about anything, I want them to go, wow, there's something different about you. Even if they don't say it, I want them to say, man, you contribute sunshine in my life, or you contributed something really, I don't know what it is, I want to smell more of it, or I want to have more of it, or whatever. That's when you get a chance to really talk about Jesus. That's when you get a chance for kids to go, okay, I don't really know what she knows, but I feel really good around him. We have some hymns over there. We didn't have any, only hers over here. I feel really good around that person. I want more. I want to snuggle up to it. The lady liked it so much that I pulled out my little sampler thing and gave her my On Guard, just because I said, well, it won't last long, but here you go. You can try some of that. I want people to want what I have. And then I want to be prepared with my little samples, just like I am often with oils. I want to be able to say, here's some for you. Try it. Let me know. Share it with other people, because I want you to feel good, feel loved, and I want you to make a difference and change the world. Grace changes you, and it will change the people who come in contact with you if you just soak it up and then are willing to say to God every day, show me where to use it and how to give it away. Before you leave, make sure you put that little 10-word sentence down there that just says, what do I want to take away from this? And I like it I like it for me when my sentences start with, I will, or I know, or I can. Something proactive like that. For me it might be, I can soak up God's grace and be available to give it away. Whatever you want to take away from today, put it down there and at least read it one more time tonight before you go to bed. Do that with every class you're in today. Let's close with prayer. Father, I thank you so much just for the pure joy and pleasure of gathering with other folks who love you and love your kids. I pray that you would help us to know on a regular, routine basis, especially when we mess it up, especially on bad days, especially on fear-filled days and on self-loathing days or days when other folks are so nasty or mean or awful to us, that you love us, that you've called us to a purpose, and that you promise that if we let that love change us from the inside out, that you will change people with us. Thank you for promising to use us and love us every day. Amen.